Well, I had a few people complain that my tour of my home office didn't include much of my home office. I ended up kind of showing the rest of the house and skipping over most of the office setup, so I said I'd show you a little bit more here of what we got in here. I didn't really get to poke around too much here, so this is where I do most of my work now. I've got a lot of the old rock and roll comics artwork, framed, the old Beatles comic, a bunch of the artwork on the walls, mostly from rock and roll comics, a little bit of the Carnal Comics artwork in here as well. And we got the big old banner that Heather Dawn painted for our convention appearances. Smaller banner she did for us. And some other original paintings on the wall. David Bowie. Got the Kiss comics. Got some of the old rock and roll comic shirts here we used to sell too. Plus some newer ones I found online. Some bootleg shirts. It's here rock and roll comic shirt made in China. What we didn't get a chance to look at last time really was our art archive. I'm going to go ahead and open up the closet here. We're probably one of the few companies in modern history that really maintained our art archive. We made arrangements with our artists to buy the art from them, and instead of spreading it out all over the world, so we still own pretty much every piece of artwork from all the original rock and roll comics and Carnal Comics, including the cover paintings. And a lot of these are 30, 35 years back that were published, and we still have almost all of it here. Sold very few pieces. That's unusual. I think in modern history, EC was one of the last big companies that really kept all of its art. And I've got original cover paintings here for Carnal Comics and original books. There's a back cover for the Pink Floyd Experience by Scott Jackson. The Pink Floyd Experience artwork. What else we got? This is actually just the stuff that we've been scanning for the last few weeks. Here's a Led Zeppelin spoof from, I think, Rock and Roll Comics 11. This was a great story that I enjoyed writing on Spirit, which I think ran in one of the Doors comic books. There's an original piece of art for one of our covers by Greg Fox for Led Zeppelin Experience. Got a whole shelf full of Deepest Dimension stuff here. I've got all of the original art from the stories. I've got the promo artwork. One of my pride and joys here of my collection is the complete Ring of Truth story that I wrote with George Clayton Johnson from the original Twilight Zone, and that's drawn by Spain Rodriguez, one of the founders of Zap Comics. Put that back up in there. So you can see we've really got quite a stash there. All the original short spoof stories. I've got even columns and things like that. This little thing up here is where I keep papers like the original columns and proof sheets. I got some of the original sketches that we would turn in to base the artwork on. See what we're working on now in the scans here. What we've been scanning recently is some of the sports cards. A lot of people don't realize how much work we put into our bound-in sports cards. A fellow named Scott Penzer drew and painted all of these actually. And for about a year and a half or so, all of our color sport comics had these bound-in sport cards. This might be about the only collection of all of them that you'll ever see. It might be the only one that exists. And of course, mine that I'm scanning also includes things like the color separations minus the logos, the original blue lines. And what's really amazing is this original artwork. Here's one of Scott Penzer's original paintings. I really love this series that he did here. I'm not a big sport comic fan because I often blame them for running through all of our money and costing us a lot of things we could have been doing in rock and roll comics. But I have to admit, these are beautiful pieces. I also have the original color codes that Scott did with colored pencils for the artist. That's what these are here. And he would give those to the color separator. Here's one of the pieces of art for the black and white ones. And this one has the plastic overlay, the logos, which would show the prints of where to put all of those. And here's one each of all the finished cards. And our collection is actually unfolded cards. If someone were to collect every single issue of our sport comics and pull out every single one of the cards, yeah, they would have a whole set, but they'd all be creased down the center. This is probably the only unfolded set of Revolutionary sports cards on the planet that you're looking at. I imagine it's worth at least $10, $15, hard to say. These really aren't that collectible. No one knows they exist, so they're not looking for them. But hey, maybe someone will see this video online and say, wow, I need to collect those. And they'll hit eBay and start buying our sport comics. So we also have things like all of our appearances on TV and stuff, all the videos, which have been in the process of duping to DVD. That's why you see all kinds of old betas and VHSs here. There's the Nightingale figurine. It's produced for Carnal Comics. I even have some of the original artwork for our logos here. That's the original Rock Comics mini bio hand-drawn artwork. Heather's hand-drawn logo for the TV Teens magazine. This is the original zip-toned Tipper Gore's Comics and Stories logo. Zip-a-tone still stuck to it after all these years. Now here's something. There's the original hand-drawn Rock and Roll Comics logo from the first few issues. Done on black ink on a piece of artboard there. And I have copies of our comics signed by various subjects that I've met through the years. We've got our scrapbooks with all of our press clippings in there. It's really, you know, a fairly complete archive that covers everything we did, and hard to believe it was only, you know, a few years, but less than 10 years altogether. 1989 to 1998 or so is when we stopped doing the Carnal Comics. 1999. Did an awful lot of stuff in that 10 years, and still got all the stuff here to show for it. Got a poster from when the Rock and Roll Comics documentary film debuted in New York City that everybody there signed, including all the artists and filmmakers and such. Another one of my prized possessions. So there you go. That's a tour of the Rock and Roll Comics office. And as I mentioned, this is only just the artwork that is in the process of being scanned. If you really want to have your mind blown, I should point out that Revolutionary published about 300 comic books altogether. We did another 100 or so at Carnal Comics. So those shelves that you see in there of artwork is really literally just the tip of the iceberg. Because what we have back here is the rest of the artwork. And it might be kind of hard to see in the dark, so I'm just going to kind of give you a little glimpse here. But what we've got now back here, I'm going to have to grab a lamp here for this to be visible. There we go. You see, when you figure 300 comic books from Revolutionary and another 100 or so from Carnal, what we've got back here is about 6 shelves here full of folders with all the rest of the original artwork in it. You can kind of barely see it here under this light, but it's 6 full long shelves back here in the garage full of just folders. Here we go, filled with Rock and Roll Comics and Carnal Comics artwork. There we go. So altogether, what we've got is about 3,000 pages of artwork. And then, you know, not counting the covers and things like that. And that's all out in the garage because I just don't have room for it in the office. In the process of putting some shelves together out here so that hopefully soon, I've got some of it here, moved out here to the living room for now. And eventually we're going to put these shelves here in the office and we'll be able to get all of the Revolutionary and Carnal Comics archive back in one place out here. Back in the old office. This is where I do all my work now. on this big old giant screen that I use for the artwork. That's an album cover commission in progress. And if I got to do something on a really big screen, I've got one even bigger behind there for album cover commissions like that. So there we go. That's the Rock and Roll Comics office. There's a signed Dick Clark comic strip from the old Rock and Roll Rock and Roll Remember comic strip that only lasted about 8 months. A little of sampling of virtually everything we ever did. So hope you enjoyed that. A little more in detail. Now you see kind of where it all happens. Where it all happened. We do still license an awful lot. So hope you enjoyed that. Come again.